Okay, thank you, Sarah. And we have our little fair trade helpers who took some chocolate and coffee to the post office today, and each package is sent with love. So thank you for supporting us, and thank you for holding that role, Sarah. Okay, now back to our regular programming. I will now pass the proverbial mic over to Holly Greenhagen. Holly will be leading our next presentation called Garment Worker Vulnerability and the Global Health Crisis. A huge thanks to Holly for organizing this next session. Holly is the queen of writing good, meaty questions. Holly has degrees in journalism from Northwestern University and fashion design from the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising. She has a longtime interest in ethical fashion and carried only eco-friendly, fair trade, and small batch labels in the bridal atelier she ran for 13 years. I hope I pronounced that right. She has worked as a technical designer, a fashion instructor, and a freelance pattern maker, and is currently the production manager at CFT member Mata Traders, a well-loved fashion line. She serves as Chicago Fair Trade's Conscious Closet Club's co-chair. Holly, are you there?
I'm here. I'm ready and I'm excited to do this, but I'm slightly unhappy to report that my first guest doesn't seem to be on the meeting yet. So perhaps, Catherine, can you roll with some punches here and start with Pushpika?
Sure.
I can tell you the slide number. So let me just tell everybody first, while you're thinking about that, I want to thank everybody who has agreed to let me interview them tonight. And I decided to do it as 3 interviews with slideshows rather than sort of a panel discussion, so that we could discuss sort of a greater variety of topics. There are going to be a lot of resources mentioned along the way, so I'm hoping that we can post some of the links in the chat as we go along. I'll try to do that, but maybe I can get a little help from the other behind the scenes personnel. And we are starting a little early, so I'm pretty sure we'll have time for questions if anybody has any by the time we get to the end. We've got 3 great guests tonight: Elizabeth Cline, Pushpika Freitas, and I hope I'm not butchering your name, Pushpika, but
it's not at all.
And we've also got Jamie Hayes joining us. So we were going to do Elizabeth first, but since she is probably not quite here yet, Catherine, if you want to start with slide 11, we could just do that. Will that work for you?
Yep.
Okay.
Got it.
All right. So Pushpika, I know I don't know you really well, but I'm going to attempt to introduce you anyway. We've had some good conversations over the past week, so I feel like I know you a little bit. Just waiting for our slide to come up, perhaps. Yeah. Oh, the things we do these days.
Can you see it?
There's Elizabeth. Yeah.
Is it working?
Hey,
so now, what shall we do? Shall we go back? I only see a little sliver of the slide. Sure. Hi, Elizabeth.
That's strange, and I'm very sorry about that. But because I have it on my full screen and it was working before, okay. Let's hold on for a sec. You know, it's not okay. An online event if you don't have some technical difficulties, right?
That's right.
If you guys
nice
can chat
color
for a
on
second.
you.
Oh, nice top.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. Thank you.
Is this how
we'll go back
sheltering in place? Okay, I'll get there. I'll be right there.
This is going to be such a great recording to watch later. Can we edit it? Well, it's nice to see you, Elizabeth. I guess, Pushpika, is it okay if we go back to our regularly scheduled order? Okay. Thanks for coming in. I know it's an hour later where you are, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, I had to hold off on a cocktail hour until after this. So.
Me too. You're gonna have a cocktail afterwards, though?
I am, yeah.
Okay.
You are too?
I mean, I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
I won't lie. So thanks for joining in from New York. I feel like this audience probably already knows you pretty well, as you just spoke 2 weeks ago at DePaul Fair Trade Committee's Fashion Revolution event. But I don't know who the crossover audience is. So just for those of you who don't know Elizabeth, she is the author of 2 books. Oh, it's not sharing. Okay, well, I'll just keep talking. She's the author of 2 books, Overdressed, which was published in 2012. And now it's sharing.
Okay.
There's our first slide. So can you go to the next slide? We can always abandon the slides too, I suppose.
This is the first slide. Sorry, you guys. Can you see the cover photo for the talk right now?
Yes.
And then there's Elizabeth. Great. Let's go from here. Thank you for your patience, everybody.
I'm still not actually seeing the slide with Elizabeth on it. Is there anyone else?
No.
Okay. There she is. Okay.
The slightly younger Elizabeth.
I know. We got glamorized by Isabel. Thank you, Isabel. Anyway, Overdressed, which you published in, is it 2012? Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And The Conscious Closet, which just came out last year. You're also the author of numerous articles on ethical fashion. And we were lucky enough to have you here in Chicago last fall for 2 CFT events, one at the Weaving Mill and one at the Chicago Cultural Center. So welcome back virtually, I guess.
Yeah, it's really good to see you. I had such a great time at those events in Chicago. And even though we aren't, together in person, I'm just glad to see our community continuing to talk about these issues and keep trying to make the world a better place.
It feels like the issues have just gotten a lot bigger lately, but I guess we'll get into that. Catherine, if you could go to the first slide, the next slide. The theme of our discussion tonight is the vulnerability of garment workers in the face of this health crisis. And I know it's a huge topic, and I know it's one that's been very much on your mind as you report on this subject. What's happening?
Okay, Holly.
Is there a problem?
Mine is showing the change.org slide. Do you see that?
Yep. Yes, I do.
Yeah.
So we're good. That's what I wanted to talk about first, really, was you've been doing a lot of reporting on and campaigning for garment worker safety and garment worker well-being and just garment worker, I don't know how to put it. But I just wanted you to explain the Pay Up campaign and talk a little bit about how it came to be and your involvement in it.
Sure. So, and let me know if you guys have trouble hearing me. But in the middle of March, when, stores were closing and Western consumers were in lockdown, the fashion industry made the almost unilateral decision to just cancel all of the orders that were already finished in their supplier factories around the world. So these weren't future orders. These were clothes that had already been sewn and fabric that had already been purchased for orders. And around the end of March, the Worker Rights Consortium and the Penn State Center for Global Workers' Rights figured out who some of the brands were that were canceling orders. They were the first ones to figure out how much money these orders are worth. I think that's one thing that as consumers we don't often hear about with the fashion industry is just like how much money is running through these factories for these orders. And anyway, it became immediately clear that what the fashion industry was trying to do was offload all of its, or a lot of its financial burden from the lockdowns onto the factories. So the Pay Up campaign is very, very simple in its purpose. It targets any brand that has either canceled orders, delayed payments for orders, or otherwise shortchanged factories for any money that they owed leading up to the coronavirus. And it started out with, you know, me and some other, and Remake, another labor rights group, advocacy group, which you have up here on the slide. But it, you know, it's also includes Clean Clothes Campaign, the International Labor Rights Forum, Labor Behind the Label, Extinction Rebellion. So it is now a global coalition of people fighting to get this money back for factories.
And I took this screenshot a few days ago and it shows 11,000 signatures, but I'm sure it's got more now. I should have looked that up.
And there are other petitions too. The international, I think Clean Clothes Campaign and Labor Behind the Label also have petitions. So what's one thing that's happening now is each country are kind of targeting their biggest brands. So, you know, in the US, we've tried to work on Gap. I keep hearing that they're maybe going to come around, and maybe we'll get good news about that this week. Whereas like Primark and C&A are based in the UK. So there's been a lot of specific targeting of those brands overseas. And
I know there are a lot of American brands as well. Did you just mention those? And I was thinking about too many things at once.
No,
Well,
I printed out the latest list because of course this is changing all the time, which is good. We want brands to go over onto the good side of the list. But the brands that have not, American brands that haven't paid yet include Urban Outfitters, Sears, Ross Dress for Less, Kohl's, JCPenney, Gap, and then one of Walmart's stores or brands called Asda. Specifically, I think it's their George brand. So it's a lot of companies and it's a lot of money that's owed.
Catherine, if you can advance the slide, there is a list, again, that's a few days old on the next slide. And also, I tried to share the change.org link in the chat, but I'm doing something wrong. So hopefully somebody can share that for me. I shared it privately to Catherine. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, sorry.
Yeah, what's so great about that specific petition is every time you sign an email goes directly to the CEO of these brands. So they really hear us, and all of the brands that are on the good list, on the, committed to pay in full for orders list on the left side of the screen, Adidas, H&M, Zara, all of those companies. That really is because of consumer pressure. It is because of people like everyone on this, the Zoom call asking brands to pay up. So we do have a lot of power in this situation.
So my question for you was, what has the campaign accomplished so far? And I think these two lists are a pretty big answer to that question, but is there other stuff you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we know is that the brands that have agreed to pay in full for orders, it's unlocked an estimated $600 million for factories in Bangladesh. So it's a significant sum. There are still billions of dollars missing, but 600 million is it's not nothing. And for the brands that were waiting, or the factories that were waiting on that money, that's significant. And there's an estimate that globally over $7 billion in funding have been unlocked by the Pay Up campaign. So that's significant progress. And unfortunately, and I think I saw someone ask a question in the chat, we're going to have brands start to file for bankruptcy protection. We're going to have companies going out of business. So time really is of the essence to get these other companies to move move over. And the bankruptcy thing is interesting too, because most of these companies aren't trying to go out of business. They're trying to access bankruptcy financing. So I think that any company that gets bailed out in any way still owes this money back to factories.
On the next slide, I took a screenshot of the website that you built with Benita Robledo and Rachel Wang, and I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about how you guys did that, how that came about, and its purpose.
Oh, sure. So support garment workers, super simple concept. There's a lot of great work happening to get money for direct relief to garment workers. There's, the Pay Up campaign, which is a mostly a social media and petition-based advocacy campaign. There's just a lot happening, and I noticed that a lot of people in my community were getting confused. So we just were like, okay, let's put all of this information in one place, but it's really just a portal to amplify all of these other organizations and people that are doing good work. So it's just a simple website, place to find all the petitions, all the fundraisers that you can give money to. And yeah, that's really how it came about, was us wanting to give people easy, actionable things they could do to help support garment workers right now.
And can you tell me a little bit about your two partners on this project?
Sure. Benita is a ethical fashion activist, content creator. If you don't follow her on Instagram, you should. She creates beautiful content related to easy ways to build ethical and sustainable wardrobe. Rachel Wang is a photographer and a stylist, and I believe a graphic designer. She also is on social media. I can put that in the chat. And then our other partner is Lauren Fay. My cat just came in to hang out with us. And she is the founder of the New Fashion Initiative, which is a nonprofit that advocates for ethical and sustainable fashion. So we kind of are all in this, little universe of.
That's great.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned your cat, I'm going to tell you that my dog is laying right here because he can't bear to be separated from me. On the next slide, I know this is something you've been talking about a lot on your Instagram, the situation with LA garment workers.
Yeah.
So I just took a little pic of their website. Can you talk a little bit about what's happening with them?
Sure. So the situation in Los Angeles is that there are a lot of garment workers there. The majority of them are undocumented immigrants, and they have also, many of them lost their jobs, or they're making PPE in unsafe conditions. And in general in Los Angeles, the conditions in factories, these fast fashion sweatshops, they're bad. The wages are very low. So similar to the workers in Bangladesh, these were people who went into the coronavirus crisis in a very precarious situation to begin with. So when they lost their jobs, they immediately were facing food insecurity, for example. So what the Garment Workers Center in Los Angeles is doing is raising money just to get people food, which, it continues to shock and appall me that there are people working in factories 60 hours a week who, after being out of work for 1 week, can't even afford food. But that is the situation. And yes, absolutely, these workers need direct relief. I'm in regular touch with the Garment Workers Center. They say that no donation is too small. I know a lot of us are broke right now, but really, even if you have $5, it goes to direct emergency relief for workers in LA.
And can you name some of the brands that these garment workers would be making clothes for?
Yeah, Fashion Nova, which is an online fast fashion company, is one of the biggest companies that source in LA. Forever 21, Ross Dress for Less. It's really a lot of the quick turn, cheap brands that manufacture in Los Angeles. And, you know, I think that this is an opportunity to change these dynamics between brands and factories, because this crisis is just like laying bare the fact that garment workers are still just in this very precarious situation.
All right, so let's move on to Bangladesh. On the next slide,
Okay.
I have a lot of questions for you. So, and if you want to keep talking about anything, let me know. But this is on your blog. You recently interviewed this guy, and I'm just going to butcher his name, but he's a factory owner in Bangladesh, Mustafiz Udin.
Yeah.
Udin. Yeah. And he has been openly critical of the big brand order cancellations. I've got a picture here from Al Jazeera on the right of garment workers going back to work on, I think, April 27th or something like that. So I guess I just wanted to know what he had to say about how things have changed in Bangladesh since Rana Plaza, since 2013, and of course, since this pandemic as well.
Yeah, I mean, Mustafiz is a really, you know, he's a courageous person, and he's an exceptional person, because he has he's invested so much to make his factory more sustainable. It's one of the most sustainable factories in the world. And he's also continually putting himself on the line to call out brands that have canceled orders, not just in his factory, but across Bangladesh, because there is an intense amount of fear among, you know, with the factory base. They're afraid. They're afraid to say who's canceled orders, because they're worried that they're never going to get their business again. And unfortunately, I think that they're right. You know, Mustafiz feels now that he's probably going to be blacklisted. He's not sure if his factory will ever run again. He's still owed $10 million for clothes that his workers had already sewn leading up to this crisis. But your question was specifically what had changed before coronavirus. And, you know, he would tell you, and I think a lot of people would tell you who worked in Bangladesh after Rana Plaza, is that there were very dramatic improvements in safety. There were really big investments into sustainability. I think the question is, if the industry does not get the billions of dollars back that is owed to them, how many of these factories are going to be able to stay in business? You know, all of these questions that we're having about how we're going to, you know, rebuild this sustainable, ethical industry, to me, it's a moot point if all of these factories that have done all this work just fold because brands owe them, basically stole money from them.
I was also reading recently that the reason that a lot of factories rush to open so soon is because they see the pie shrinking and they don't want to lose out on the money that is going to be spent.
That what we're hearing is the pressure is coming from a lot of different directions. One, they're afraid that if they don't reopen first, that brands are just going to go to Vietnam or they're going to go to Ethiopia. And they're right. They're right. That is what brands are going to do. They're just going to find somewhere else to produce. I'm also hearing that brands are directly pressuring factories to reopen.
Before we go to the next slide, I just wanted to make it clear that this is not a picture of Mustafiz's factory. It's just a random picture that I found. It just occurred to me that might be misleading. But can we go to the next slide, Catherine? I'm not sure this slide directly relates to my question for you, but it's a picture from the Bangkok Post of garment workers washing their legs before entering a factory, and this is in Dhaka. I wanted to ask you how, you know, after Rana Plaza, there was an accord signed between factories and the government and brands that put in place a lot of improvements. And I guess I'm wondering your opinion or your researched opinion on how monitoring and certification programs like that have been helping and where they're not helping, and are they still helping?
The accord is its own thing that was very, very effective. And that's because it was legally binding, and it was properly funded. So I guess I would say there aren't a lot of things like the Accord. And what I'm starting to hear people say is, how do we take the Accord model and use it to hold brands accountable moving out of this crisis? Because there has been a lot of great reporting in recent weeks that auditing is not really working. Multi-stakeholder initiatives that only have voluntary commitments are not really working. So how do we take something like the Accord, where you have factories, unions, NGOs, brands, and governments all at the table and agreeing to a set of protocols? How do we take that and make it happen across, the entire sector, really?
That's kind of a big question.
Yeah.
All right, well, I guess I'm shifting gears here, and we can come back. I see one good question in the chat already, but I wanted to touch on this story that you just published.
Someone brings up a really good point that
the bankruptcy.
That I didn't. We sort of we touched on the bankruptcy. I mean, like J. Crew, for example, applied for bankruptcy financing. They're not planning to go out of business. So I think that any company that is solvent owes this money back to factories. But someone brought up the fact that undocumented workers don't have a safety net. They don't get unemployment. They don't get the stimulus check. And that's such a good point, because that's exactly, they're really in the same boat as workers in Bangladesh, where the government is able to offer only the most meager of severance. I think workers this past month got $100, and then that's it. That'll be it. That's what the government was able to offer as a bailout to garment workers in Bangladesh. So, okay, so now we're talking about cotton.
Well, you feel like talking about cotton?
Yeah.
You just published this story, and I just thought it was so interesting because it talks a bit about how consumers are embracing. Well, one of the farmers talks about how her customers are more interested in organic products, and another farmer sort of has a different opinion. But I guess my overall question was, do you think that consumers are starting to embrace sustainable materials more? And more importantly, how would a shift in the popularity of organic cotton, for instance, have a positive outcome for the workers?
That's a lot to dig into. So the story really looks at the American organic cotton program. And I think that one of the things that I took away from it is that, especially when you're talking about farming or any type of agricultural product, which cotton is, you have to be more specific than saying organic cotton. Where was this organic cotton grown, and under what circumstances, by whom? Because in West Texas, the organic cotton program is very successful. It is I'm not going to say easy to grow it there, but these farmers over the past 30 years have just gotten really good at it. And I am concerned that the world is chasing off, in hot pursuit of newfangled sustainable materials, when here we've got this, organic cotton program that works, it's underfunded, undersupported, underpromoted. Most people don't know these farmers are even there. So I feel like it's one of those situations where the fashion industry is always so obsessed with what's new and shiny and cheap, when here's this program of very successful farmers who've just figured out how to grow cotton without chemicals. And it's just so beautiful. And I just wish more people knew what they were doing and supported what they were doing.
If anybody wants to read the article, I can put that link in the chat. It's at Another Tomorrow. Well, my last question for you is, I'm not sure one that I'm sure you've been thinking about it a lot, but I I guess I just wanted to know, and Catherine, if you could advance the slide, I just put some other stuff in here. I mean, we heard different things in the news every day, and certainly supply chains are going to be affected, and certainly businesses are going to go out of business. I mean, brands are going to go out of business. And so I wondered if you had any thoughts about what the fashion industry or the fashion world is going to look like when we're coming out of this in 2 years.
I mean, one thing we already know is that it's going to be a winner-take-all industry. A lot of companies, we've in the States, we've been seeing the retail apocalypse unfold for years, but there's going to be a lot of companies that go out of business, and there's going to be a lot of very big brands left. H&M, all the luxury conglomerates like LVMH and Kering, Adidas, Nike, all of the financially healthy apparel giants are going to be fine. So I think that that's one thing that's important to remind our community, because a lot of us are very idealistic and we seem to think that we're headed towards this like sustainable and ethical fashion utopia. But just from what the retail news is saying, that's not exactly how it's going to play out. But on the other hand, what's happened is that in the States is everyone who does already have enough, by pausing for a second and realizing how many people around us don't have enough. I think that is profoundly shaping the psychology of this country. And I see people interested in economic justice and fairness and making sure everyone has a safety net. And, that anyone, if we ever enter in a crisis like this again, that people don't immediately kind of slide into destitution, that's not acceptable in the richest country in the world. It's not acceptable anywhere, because the global economy is so big and so wealthy now. There's just not really any excuse. So I see that changing society in many ways, and changing the fashion industry. And I think in the fashion industry, what ultimately needs to change is finding concrete ways to hold brands accountable. And I know that that's what the factories in Bangladesh would want to.
So you're talking about like governmental structural change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or, I mean, if we can't do it through laws, again, something like the Accord, which was kind of, different organizations coming together with a binding agreement, that could work as well. And it's something that will continue to write about, like what that structure would look like. And I will continue to talk to people who have ideas about it, because we don't have a lot of time. I worry that things will just start to go back to normal, or like an even worse version of normal, if we don't start having these conversations now.
There's a question in the chat. I know we're running a little long, but are there any venues for garment workers to share their personal stories with the public?
Yeah. The Garment Worker Center posts from time to time about workers' experiences in Los Angeles. The Garment Worker Diaries, which is something, a project that Fashion Revolution collaborates with, is also another avenue where workers can share their stories with the public. But it's a good question, because it's not happening enough. And I know that that's partially one of the missing pieces, is that like human connection, like how is this really impacting people in their everyday lives? So I will do my part to keep getting those stories out as well.
That's actually a great segue into our next segment, because Pushpika is going to talk a lot about exactly what's happening to her artisans in India. So I really want to thank you for your time, your expertise. I know we just scratched the surface, but it's so great to hear you answer these tough questions. And everybody should go buy both of your books and read them.
Thank you.
Are you going to stick around?
I have a prior commitment,
Okay.
so I can't.
All right. I see
so
Emma
good to
Westfall's
see you.
question, and we'll try to get to some other questions at the very end if we can too. But thank you so much for your time,
Yeah.
Elizabeth.
Yeah, of course. It's so good to see all of you, and take care of yourselves.
You too.
Bye.
Bye. So to move on to Pushpika, she is, of course, one of the driving forces behind Marketplace Handwork of India, which I'm familiar with because its headquarters are located in Evanston, where I live, but also, of course, because it's a Chicago Fair Trade business member. And I also want to just mention quickly that Marketplace was founded in 1980, right? Is that right? So that makes you like a true pioneer in this area. So given the topic of our discussion today, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the ways in which the fair trade framework of your of Marketplace has affected the way that it's coped with the crisis. And I know you've done a lot of, you've put together a lot of these slides to illustrate what's happening. And so I'm gonna let Catherine pop that up and let you take it away. Can we just start with the brief description of Marketplace and how it got started?
Sure. Catherine, you'll take us to the next slide. Thank you. So yeah, as you said, Marketplace actually started in the early 1980s, in 82, 83, when my sister Lalita Montero and myself realized that women in the slums worked really long hours, did menial work, did not have even the ability to use the money in the way they felt, the money they earned in the way they felt it should be used, and just didn't have any control, didn't have a voice in the family. And when we wanted to do something about it, we did not have an actual plan. Catherine, go to the next slide, please. We didn't really have a plan, and truth be told, I haven't really written a strategic plan ever. As a friend of mine said, if I had tried to do a strategic plan, I probably wouldn't have started Marketplace. So, so that was good. Yeah. But basically, when we started, we didn't have anything. We didn't have a space. We didn't have money to buy machines. The women didn't know how to use machines, but they did know handwork. So we started with handwork. So actually, work from home started in the early 1980s for us, but for different reasons. Basically, it was in order to provide women with the ability to earn a living while looking after their families. The next one, Catherine. So today we work with 10 cooperatives, about 200 women and families, and mostly in the slums in Mumbai. Marketplace Bombay manages the design process, the production planning, working with the groups, training on new styles, quality control up to shipping, the entire supply chain. And SHARE, which is the organization that we had started right in the beginning, really works with the social and personal development of the artisans. So they conduct and facilitate various initiatives that inform, organize, and locate resources for the women. And the empowerment comes from the women discovering themselves, discovering their strengths, and shaping the role that the future that they have for themselves, their families, and their communities. So we'll go to the next slide. So basically, we're about empowering women and social change. And so the business of actually making clothes and selling them is really a means to that end. Okay, next one.
Sure, sure. Well, of course, I want to ask you how the pandemic has affected the daily lives of the women in your artisan groups. And specifically, I mean, how are they dealing with the day-to-day basics like paying for food and taking care of their kids and keeping up their morale?
Yeah, like the entire world, India is affected by the pandemic. The women, the artisans too. Um, in India, the government of India closed down, shut everything down within 4 hours. They basically said at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, at 8 o'clock, everything is going to be closed. So it gave people no time to prepare for anything. And it's not really shelter in place, it's lockdown. You have police on the streets, you have all public transportation is closed. There are certain hours where you can go to buy groceries. But if they do find a case in an area, they will just cordon it off and no questions asked. So we've heard women talking about how for 2-3 days they have just had tea without milk, because milk is something that you have to buy every day, and so they were not able to store it. So it's really very, 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 very strict. Let me go to the next slide, Catherine. So, we're talking about slum communities. So imagine 4, 6, 8 people living in 10 by maybe 20 feet room, and basically being there all the time. They cannot go for walks like we can here, and so it's really hard. And it's really hard, especially for the women who live in communities that have communal toilets. They're petrified about going out of the house. Next one, Catherine. But there are some good things that have come out of it too, that, board games have come out, and kids are doing crafts. Fathers and husbands are playing with their kids and helping with the cooking even, and so there are some good things that have come out of it. And the one thing we've seen over the years is the Mumbaiites are really they really rise to the occasion. So there are a number of individuals, nonprofits, organizations that have started kind of what we have here, the food banks. They're much more spontaneous, but they are, that's happening a lot, and it continues. It wasn't only for the first week and the first two weeks. And even the fabric suppliers, the next one, Catherine. The fabric suppliers who we work with really small fabric suppliers who do block printing and kalamkari, and this is a photograph of a kalamkari supplier. They're not really big, but they really went out and provided their artisans with day-to-day, not only rice, wheat, dal, but also with vegetables and fruits and stuff, which was really amazing to see.
That's a great picture.
Marketplace, just in terms of what Marketplace is doing, Marketplace is providing, we're doing more of food subsidy, not really paying the wages, because it's a little hard to do that since women are not, it's not a factory. They're not there all the time. So some of them will be working for half a day, or some of them will be working for the entire day. So what we try to do is to figure out how much it would cost them to feed a family of 4 or 6, and are providing that money. And we have from the time the lockdown to now, and
okay,
we've just made a commitment that we're going to continue.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. I wasn't sure if you were going to talk about that, but that makes a lot of sense. That sounds complicated too.
And so necessary.
And so necessary. I know that as part of your regular development activities with the artisans, that you had put some programs in place, I think late last year, which we were talking about are now kind of helping the women to cope. Can you talk a little bit about those programs and how they're helping?
Yeah, I love this photograph, right? Actually, we can go back to that. Giving back to the community is one of the values that is very, very high on the list of not only Marketplace, but the artisans too. And as soon as the lockdown started and people started talking about masks, women just used fabric they had from their workshops and started making masks for everybody. So, and this was really, such a cute, it was just something that they did, and which has really helped in the long run. But when the lockdown first started, the women, everybody was very scared. They were scared about health. They were scared about their income. And what we, nobody knew how to deal with this. So what we thought was that each of the staff of Marketplace and Share would start calling 2 or 3 artisans every day. We were really fortunate because the women, everybody has a cell phone. And a lot of the social programs would be, when they were run and coordinated, they were through WhatsApp. So we had a database of all the different cell phones. So the staff started calling the women couple women a day and just seeing how they were. First they started just talking, and then they started exchanging ideas on what to do with the kids and how to deal with different things, even up to like food. I mean, one of the things the women said, we don't have that much money, but the kids at home, and all they keep doing is saying we're hungry. So what do we give them? What do we make? And so there were different ideas that came up. So there was a lot of dialogue where that was concerned. We can go to the next one, Catherine. About a couple of years ago, before the pandemic, we have a lot of different social programs, and one of them was where the artisans themselves felt they should do a study or a survey on health of the artisans. And one of the things that came up was hypertension and worrying. And so we started yoga classes. And like a lot of them were very enthusiastic about it and kept doing it, if not every day, 3 times a week. And then like a lot of us would say, oh, I don't have the time and stuff. So now everybody has the time to do it. There are no excuses here. And they're doing it not only, as you can see from the photographs, not only themselves, but they've got their families involved and their children. But another program that we have been, that we had done, which has really come in useful now at this point, at this stage, was the government of India has always given a food subsidy to the poor. But that whole system was totally corrupt, and people would never get the amount that they were supposed to get. So we contacted a couple of organizations that worked on this issue in Mumbai and educated the women as to what their rights were and what they needed to do if they were not getting what they were due. And then they extended it, they educated their neighbors so that the neighbors, in fact, there were stories where the ration shop owner, when he saw some of our artisans coming, he would really get very nervous because he had to.
Because they were educated.
Do the right thing.
Right, exactly.
But now it's really coming in useful, because the only thing that the government of India has done so far is increase that food subsidy. And they haven't really done anything for small businesses, for any other area. And the women now, know what to do, and they're helping their neighbors to get what they should be getting.
That's fantastic. That's a great program. I know the Marketplace blog has been very actively documenting the day-to-day, and it's really fun to look at. And I asked you to pick out a few entries that you were particularly interested in talking about that really stand out to you tonight, just to give people the flavor. And then I'll just share the link here so people can
right, and we can just run through it a little bit.
Yeah.
Some of it I've talked about. I don't know how we're doing at time, but one of the things, now looking back, we wanted to be communicating to the customer about what was happening, because a lot of the customers were asking us what was happening and how the artisans were doing. But we also realized that the artisans were so thrilled to take photographs of themselves and their families. And we got, I have tons of photographs of what the women are doing and how they are dealing with it. So here, we have photographs of them sewing. A few of them had sewing machines at home, and they were sewing for their families, but also for the community. Then there were so many really good ones where the families were getting together and playing together, whether it was just the kids or the parents, the fathers. That was really great. And then, you adapt, right? I think 3 days after the lockdown was the Hindu New Year. And so how you cannot go to the temple, and you cannot go to the mosque, and you cannot go to the church, and how the women were worshiping from home. And then the last one on this link is one of my favorites. This is the blog.
Oh, yeah, I like this one too.
That we work with, that is fairly close to Mumbai, and they have hundreds of blogs. And every time the designer would go, she was like climbing over things and trying to find the blocks, and they were dusty, and so they themselves, without anybody saying anything, took them all out, cleaned them up. Segregated them by design, like the flowers and the stripes and the geometrics, and labeled them, and putting a kind of a booklet together so you could see, oh, okay, I like this design, and then you know where to go for the block. So this is something that really would never have happened if we had not if the virus was not
Yes. It's one of those spring cleaning kinds of things that's it's always on your list, but you never actually do it. But now they've done it.
Major spring cleaning, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and here, you see them using different materials with the kids and creating different things. And, you realize how we're all very similar, right? That's what we're doing with our kids or grandchildren, and making do or cooking together. Cooking is something that has brought people together. Although we have heard some women saying, we'd rather just cook it alone and do it our way instead of having all this interference.
Yeah, those are universal problems, right?
Then, kids doing different, being creative in different ways, doing different craft projects. This was right in the beginning. Now they're doing a little bit more studies and things like that, because it's just going on and on.
I love that. Is that a potato?
Yes, that is a potato. And then here again, it's how the fathers are involved. And again, here the really nice thing is that these photographs are being shared among each other. So the other fathers are seeing, fathers are seeing other fathers playing with the kids, and then thinking, hey, we can do this too, or getting inspired. And then eating, again, is another thing that bonds us, has always bonded us, and much more so now.
That's great. Do we have time for another page, Catherine? Okay.
Okay, yeah, and so here, you have the social distancing, the masks. Let's see, what else do we have on this one? Oh, this is really amazing, because Mumbai, you never see 1 square inch with nobody on it, a car or a person or a scooter or whatever. The photograph to the bottom right is the second largest train station in Mumbai, and the train system is extremely popular and efficient there. And nobody's ever seen it empty. Right. And so this is really what Mumbai looks like now. And then giving back has always been one of our values. And so after the first time that the women got the food subsidy or the help from Marketplace, they all said, hey, we need to do something to give back. And so they all started embroidering, using whatever fabrics they had at home and doing them, and really and I'm like, oh, okay, we should take some tips from this for our designs, because some of them are really great. And so now we're using them, because eventually it's the customer, right? And telling the customer they purchase, like for Mother's Day, we said, you purchase and then you get a free square. And the last one here is, again, the fabric suppliers. This was something that really touched my heart, that, they're not, you hear, when we heard Elizabeth about the Gap and all these other huge companies who are just abandoning their suppliers. Here you have really small fabric suppliers that have, just stepped up to the plate.
Yeah, that's really inspiring.
Yeah, I think, and then, everybody was getting sick of meetings they have WhatsApp meetings. And so the director of Marketplace said, okay, we're going to start a meeting by talking about the last vacation you took with your family.
Oh, that's what this is.
Yeah. And that was really a fun meeting. And the first photograph is Abdul with his family. He's the pattern. He does the patterns, pattern making, and then there's Shruti, who is with Education for Life. But it was just, we're just trying to be really creative to keep people interested and make things fun, And then there's Kala, I think, down, and then there's Bhakti. Kala is the design, the merchandiser, and then Bhakti. The last one is Bhakti with her nephew.
Okay. That's cute.
Yeah.
It's nice to see all this. I mean, you guys have been putting a lot of time into this blog, and it's really nice to see all these pictures. I guess in closing, I just wonder if you do you have any thoughts about the long-term outcome, good or bad, of this crisis on India, specifically on these artisan groups?
Right, and I put that photograph there because, this is, of course, pre-COVID, right? But every year we have a celebration of Artisan Day, and it is really amazing because, in the first place, the women come really all dressed up, and each group does a performance, either it's a skit or a dance, and it's just there were such beautiful photographs that I thought I had to share them. The future, the long-term outcome, it is really very worrying. On the one hand, I'm hopeful that there is hope we will get through this, but it is also, when you look at the entire supply chain, right, that is broken. We have products sitting in Mumbai and we have back orders going up here. What do we do in the fall? What do we do where do we do a catalog even in the fall? But we have to do it because the women are going to, at some point, maybe not that soon. They need to start earning a living.
Right.
So I really don't know what the long-term impact is. I think India has not, there's really no help. You don't see any help at all from the government. I think the one thing, and I think Elizabeth talked about this too, is the caring. And I think that's what fair trade is, right? It's basically caring about other people, how we buy, why we buy, from whom we buy, but also the caring that it's not just what I want and what I need, it is what other people, this is really showing us the inequality, how much we have, however little anybody might think they have here, it is still way more than, not anybody, but sorry, not at this time, but there's so many different levels of need, and the one hope that I have is that we really never forget the lessons we are learning at this time.
Yes. Well, that's a great note to end on. I really appreciate your time tonight, Pushpika. It's nice to see some uplifting, positive things in this difficult time for everyone. and to learn more about Marketplace. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
I'm going to move on to Jamie. Hi, Jamie.
Hi, Holly.
I know you primarily as a clothing designer because, of course, we met at a fair a long time ago where we were both selling clothes. But, of course, you're also a social and political activist. You've got a master's in social work from University of Chicago. You've worked as a labor organizer. You've worked with fair trade organizations, and you were instrumental in helping pass Chicago's sweatshop free ordinance in 2014. So, I mean, you've got a lot to say, I'm sure, and I'm sure Catherine's going to get us to try to do this as quickly as possible. But I wondered, first of all, if as a business owner and somebody who is connected with a lot of other local business owners in the clothing industry, can you talk a little bit about how the pandemic has affected the garment industry here in Chicago?
Well, echoing what Elizabeth was saying, you know, our biggest worry is really the garment workers here because so many of them are undocumented and then they're left out of all of the CARES package, you know, relief. They're not going to get a stimulus check and what have you. So I know that people that I work with and am close to within the independent design community have actually been paying advances and using these mask making initiatives to primarily make sure that employees and contractors get paid. So that's really a beautiful, virtuous circle in that people need PPE. When we wear masks, we're obviously protecting others in our community. And then also we're making sure that these people still have work, especially since they have no safety net. So that's one thing. I will also say a lot of us are working outside of the regular fashion system. And I'm particularly happy that I've made those choices right now because, you know, we're in a really collaborative model, very similar to fair trade, where we're not competing against one another, but supporting one another. So that's been true with our mask making initiatives, but also just in regular life where we're sharing client lists and techniques, connections to service providers. So that has all continued and in fact made us all closer together. And I know that has really supported my mental health, and also our clients have supported us. You know, we're not dependent on department stores or wholesale accounts. And I want to mention that, again, that connects us to contractors and workers in Bangladesh. It's a very similar system here in the US that I know many people, many independent designers whose businesses have been ruined because a department store has canceled an order after that order has already been designed, cut and sewn. So again, us working kind of tight to deadline and really lean has allowed us to be nimble in this situation and survive.
Catherine, if you can just advance the slide. I just wanted to show, this is just a representation of the other folks you're working with on this mask making initiative that I wanted to ask you about in a little more detail. So we've got Jamie, and we've got the weaving mill down here on the left, and Anna Hovett's studio up in the top, Anna Brown's studio in the middle, and that's Wolfka's studio over on the right. So if you want to go to the next slide, I'm sorry to just pass over that so quickly, but I wanted to talk about the masks and ask you how you decided what to make and how it got started.
Sure. Again, it's a really lovely story of information sharing and collaboration. We were lucky to, in that our studio manager, Emma Collins, her mother is an emergency room doctor in Louisville, Kentucky. So she was giving us information about the COVID epidemic very early on compared to most people, and also was the one who first brought this need for masks to my attention. Then we all started researching it. Melissa Gamble from Columbia College set up a Facebook group along with Anna Hovett. We had a Zoom call, and you know, it was a hard situation because, as with everything with this epidemic, there's so much misinformation, conflicting information. So, you know, we didn't want to do more harm than good, obviously, or waste efforts. But in the end, all of us kind of looking from a design perspective at what is the best woven fabric mask we can come up with, knowing that it's not as good or a replacement for N95, but also knowing that it would be better than a bandana. We settled on this mask. I've seen many others since that I also think are good. The key points are really that it's 2 layers of tightly woven cotton fabric, that there's a wire for the nose, so you get that tight fit over the nose, that there's a pocket for a filter, and that could be something as simple as a coffee filter or 2 layers of paper towel. And then the HK mask specifically has both twill tape ties, where you can use ribbon or cording or what have you. And it also has elastic ear loops. A lot of people have trouble with the elastic ear loops, but since you have the ties, you can get that nice tight fit and it gathers in a casing on the side. So tight fit and that filtration is really what you're looking for. So this mask has all those things.
So then if we go to the next slide, at some point you shifted gears. And so can you just tell me why you changed direction and how you did it?
Sure. Well, from the get-go, I had seen this University of Florida Department of Anesthesiology website. My studio mate, Jerry Quinton, had shared it with me, and it's a great mask alternative. It passes fits tests as well as an N95, and then the filtration capacity of the fabric, which is called halyard, has never been tested specifically for COVID, but we highly suspect that it's much more effective than the 2 layers of cotton. Halyard is a medical fabric that is used to wrap surgical instruments. So you might have seen it on a surgical tray in an operating room. And so it's also this beautiful closed loop in that after the material is used, it can go into an autoclave and be sterilized, comes out to stitchers like myself and the people that I'm working with. We sew it up and we send it right back to the hospital if they have a shortage of N95. So I had wanted to do this from the beginning, but it's really hard to get hospitals to reply back given everything that they're going through. They're just trying to stay alive and keep the people in their wards alive. And we also tried to talk to Illinois Health Department. We've since recently had some success in that. But again, at the beginning of the epidemic, I think everybody was just trying to do whatever it was that they could. But then a friend and client of mine named Esther Garcia, who's a well-known tattoo artist, she used the power of social media. She has 110,000 Instagram followers. And she thought that, well, her skill set wasn't particularly relevant in this epidemic, so that she would just teach herself how to sew. And she totally did, which is amazing and inspirational. But she also used that huge following on social media to figure out how to get this material and which hospitals needed it. And I just happened to reach out to her as a friend to ask her how she was doing. And she mentioned this, and it all came together, and she was happy to connect with us because as a new sewer, it takes her a long time to get through them, and we can really crank them out.
That's really amazing. I was really curious about that, actually. So all the time you've been giving these masks to workers, right? To frontline workers. They haven't been for public. Yeah. Okay.
The fabric mask. Yeah, actually, the fabric mask, the HK mask. At some point, we did reach out to our client list and say, hey, if you need a mask, we have you. It's just by donation, and if the more you donate, the more we're able to amplify the work and give to frontline workers. So we started with frontline workers. In the middle, we made probably about 600 masks for individuals on a pay-what-you-can basis. And now we're back to these medical grade masks, which are primarily used in an institutional setting because it's best to sanitize them with an autoclave, though you can also do it in an oven at 165 degrees.
Man, all the stuff you probably never knew before. I want to go to the next slide just so we can share some of these resources for people who are looking for masks for ordinary people. I kind of compiled a partial list, it's not complete, of local places that have pivoted to making masks. And I don't know if anybody wants to screenshot this or write some of these down, but as they are looking at this, I want to ask you, Jamie, how people can help with your mask making efforts. Do you guys need donations, or what do you suggest people do to help the general effort out there that's going on?
For sure. If they want to donate specifically to us, we've just been doing it, in a very low-key, informal basis using Anna Brown's Venmo and Zelle account. So I should probably just type it into the chat, and I will in a second.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I can talk and chat at the same time.
Chat at the same time.
Well,
I can ask you while you're typing that. I'll ask you this chat question: is modal a useful filter material? I'm going to guess the answer is no, because it's just another cellulose fiber. But do you know anything about that, Jamie?
I have not heard specifically that that's been good or bad, but like you, I would suspect it's not as good as a non-woven like a paper towel or a coffee filter. those the fact that they're non-woven makes them better, but people are avoiding making entire masks out of things like that because you still need the mask, as a whole to be both breathable and washable.
Right. I'm really sorry that this is going so quickly. I do want to ask you, what you are seeing as the long-term outcome of this pandemic about, in Chicago specifically, in the fashion world in general, if you have any thoughts from everything you've been seeing and reading and listening to.
Yes. I would say that, fashion, and I'm talking fashion, not clothing, it is nothing if it's not relevant. And so I think, it's been interesting to see different brands react. I feel like fast fashion is about the most irrelevant thing that I can think of right now. Nobody needs a new shirt. Maybe we need new lounge pants or, intimate apparel or something like that. But, we're not really out there on the street. We're not really being seen a whole lot besides our Zoom meetings. And so I think they're really struggling as to what the story should be. And then on top of that, these are really difficult times for all of us. And we're seeing the importance of government safety nets, laws that mandate everyone's safety, and also mutual aid networks. And so I think there's really a dissatisfaction with companies who are trying to push products on you right now and really try to make a panacea with kind of just buying more and more things. And I think consumers will remember that. Of course, I also think that once we come out of this, it might be like the roaring 1920s where people just want to party and forget and buy things.
They want to indulge, I think.
Exactly. So I think there'll be some of that too, and I understand that. I mean, I want nothing more than to go out dancing right now. And I will do that once I have the opportunity. So, but I still think there'll be a longer term understanding and valuing of, people and the planet over profit. I mean, a lot of the things that those of us in this fair trade movement have been saying have seemed, perhaps fringe or out there or, made us, sound like irrelevant hippies. But right now it's just like, wow, it's obvious that we need each other, that we're all interconnected. And I just hope we can build on that in this time period.
Well, that's a great place to leave it. And again, I'm sorry to not let you talk more because I know you have a lot more to say. But thanks so much
for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Pushpika. Thank you, Elizabeth Cline. Thank you to everybody who shared their comments in the chat. What an inspirational and informative first day here at World Fair Trade Day. I am going to hand it back to Sarah Fowler very quickly to share how anyone can get involved and then close us out with a preview of what's to come tomorrow.
Sure. Thanks, Andrea. So, we all want to know, what can we do? What can we do? So something right now that you can do to support fair trade is to follow us. You can follow us, you can subscribe to us, you can be our friend, you can like everything that we do. So if you go to any or please all of these channels, please subscribe to us on all of them. Take a screenshot of this if you want to make sure you're on all of them. And if you are already subscribed to all of these, please be active. Like what you're doing, share, comment, engage. That'll really help to spread the word for the fair trade movement. And then one last thing, if you'd like to be a Chicago Fair Trade volunteer, please email me and I will put you on the list, volunteering at chicagofairtrade.org. I'll put you on the list and keep you updated with volunteer opportunities, send you emails maybe just to say hi, and I'll probably ask you to buy some more coffee. All right, thanks so much.
Thank you, Sarah. And just wrapping it up here, same link, same password, same meeting ID, same time tomorrow night with two great presentations moderated by our friend and fair trade champion, Jerome McDonnell of WBEZ. It's not World Fair Trade Day without him. Our first presentation is why transparency matters in developing ethical supply chains. And we're going to be talking with Shayna Harris, contributing writer to Forbes and former chief growth officer at Farmer's Fridge. And she conceived of Chicago Fair Trade many years ago. And also Leonardo Bonanni, founder and CEO of SourceMap. Did you ever wonder where all the materials come from that create your goods? That's what SourceMap does. And after that, Jerome will lead a conversation with Chicago Fair Trade business members called Fair Trade, How Do We Survive Coronavirus? How this crisis is affecting the fair trade community, both near and far. Please tell your friends and colleagues to join us. As you know, it's whatever you can donate. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your time, your presence, and making time to learn with us, along with us. Have a great night. If everybody wants to undo their video, wave, toast, whatever you'd like to do. Thank you so much. And yay, good to see your faces. And we'll see you tomorrow. Hasta mañana.
Bye.
Hasta mañana.
Now we're going to move on to our next presentation, Fair Trade, How Do We Survive the Coronavirus? So we'll hear from Chicago Fair Trade business members working in Africa, Asia, South America, and from our executive director, Catherine Bissell-Cordova. Back to you, Jerome. Jerome, I don't know if I'm the only one who can't hear you, but you seem to be muted.
Yeah, he's muted.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot about that. My dog was barking, so when I went away, so I muted. Thanks for all the nice words. I hope everybody does get more involved with Chicago Fair Trade than they already are. And now we're going to take a little spin around the globe now. With all the different organizations that are Chicago Fair Trade businesses. And I'll give you a quick rundown of who we're going to talk to here. Jaylon Adley from Refugee is going to talk about the refugee women that she works with in Nairobi, Kenya. We're going to be talking about Bangladeshi fair trade artisans who work with Motif, founded by Jackie Corlett. And then we're going to head to Colombia and hear from Laura McMahon, and she's the owner of Susu Accessories. She works with Wayu women in Guajira, Colombia. And then we'll check in with Catherine Bissell-Cordova, Executive Director of Chicago Fair Trade. But first we're going to hear from, and I'm going to massacre her name a little bit, but Rahel Mwatulu Williams, founder and lead designer of Ilava, a fashion brand that works with artisans in Tanzania. Thanks a lot for joining us. How do you pronounce your name?
It's okay. You did great, actually. It's Rahel Mwatulu Williams. And I know you asked how you pronounce, but I'm like, it's hard to explain if you don't speak Swahili. So it's Mwatulu. And a lot of people want to say the M is silent, but it's not. It's actually Mwi. If the M is silent, it will be we. So it's Mwatulu Williams. And I'm very sensitive about my clan name, so I make sure that people pronounce my name and actually try to say my name. So I thank you for attempting it.
Mwatulu.
Yes, great. You did it.
I'm pretty good at the phonetics by now.
I
want to ask a little about Ilava, and for people who aren't familiar with it, tell us about the organization a little bit, and you've got some really pretty designs I've looked at on the internet. Tell us who you're working with.
So Ilava is actually, believe it or not, is my childhood name given to me by my maternal grandmother in my mother's native language. Nyamwezi is a tribe in Tanzania, and it actually means it can be done. And we use fashion as a way for us to give back. And my sister and I, Mwasi Mitula, we run the business. But the start of the business was because I always knew, as a migrant in the United States, I always knew that I wanted to do something that connect me back home. And I wanted to be growing up, I did not know I was poor. Growing up, I did not know we were, unskilled people. I did not know we were in extreme poverty. I grew up in a very nice family. I had everything I needed. I never fetched water a day in my life. So I did not realize I was poor, quote unquote, until I moved to the United States. So when I was going to college and just growing up, I always knew that I wanted to rewrite the narrative, what it means to be an African child, an African girl child, an African woman, because I grew up seeing so much positivity, but that was not actually the narrative that you saw on TV or what you read. So I knew that from the beginning, I wanted to connect that. But fashion was something that I love, and I thought fashion would be somewhere an easy way into that because people pay attention to fashion. So I always tell people we're not married to fashion, but we saw fashion was something that grabbed people. So while I was in graduate school, I had an opportunity to do my study abroad in Kenya, in the Kibera area, and I worked with women artisans there. And from that, those women actually, I realized these are not unskilled workers. These are not just women who are being defined by their social condition, like that widow over there, the HIV infected. I saw some amazing, talented women who make amazing product that I wore and I was proud of. And I asked myself, how do I connect these women to the resources and the industry and the market they need? Because not necessarily they want the handout, they were skilled worker. And that's when the idea of Ilava came about, and it started in Kibera, Kenya. And it's kind of crazy when I'm from Tanzania and the vision came when I was in Kenya. If you know anything about Kenya and Tanzania, we have this love-hate relationship. So people always ask me why it started in Kenya, but I always knew it was gonna be somewhere in the continent, but I did not know where. But I just want to showcase that an African child, an African woman can be part of the solution, and we are not just this recipient of this great generosity of everybody else, but we're actually making things happening. And I grew up seeing that with my mother, my grandmother, my aunties. So we work with women artisans, those women that the industry or the world has defined them unskilled, but we don't see unskilled, we see an opportunity. They just need the resource and the connection to the market, and they just want to provide for their family. So we use fashion as a tool. We were blessed a couple years ago to showcase at the LA Fashion Week. And it was the proudest moment because going back home and showing some of the women who made these clothes, like, this is your hand made this. And look at this, you're in LA Fashion Week. And they could not believe it. And I was like, wait a minute, there's some disconnect here. So there's work to be done in terms of how we market and brand the work that is being done by artisans. And they're no different. I even dare to say I work in retail so many years, from Neiman Marcus to Marshall Field. I say they are no different from Chanel or anybody else. They can make the same product quality that can be competing with anybody else in the world. So it's one of my pride and joy. My sister and I, we are really blessed to be able to rewrite the narrative, what it means to have a brand that represents the continent, run by women from the continent, working with the women from the continent. Because most of the time, believe it or not, what we do is normally seen by somebody from the Western, or it's been promoted from those who are from the Western who happen to go to the continent, and no offense, and they do the work, which is amazing. And I appreciate all the partners that are doing work to elevate the image and the positive image of the continent. But you hardly see this sort of African child, African girl, African women who are in the continent doing the work with the women in the continent. So we are very particular about that story to be shared with the world.
I want to ask how the women are doing now, and how the people, we just flashed a picture of the Kibera community on the screen. And it was, you can't be in a more densely populated place on the planet, I imagine, than Kibera. Is everybody doing okay? What's going on?
So I actually, unfortunately, a couple of weeks ago, I heard one of the women at the Kibera Paper Project actually passed away from corona. It's hard. It's impossible. There is no social distancing in there. There is no home and shelter when your home is 12 by 12, right? So even this, one of the questions we keep asking ourselves, which I am all and promoting and telling people stay home, but we have to be realistic. What does stay at home look like for that population, right? What does social distancing mean for the population? 80% of the people in the population are daily labor. That means they have to work 2 days in order to eat 2 days. There's no 2 week shopping opportunity. So it is hard. They stopped working. They're not gathering the Kibera Paper Project women. They're not coming together to make the cards like they normally will make. So one of the things we have done with the Lava, we actually did 2 months supplies of goods, food and essential goods for those women. There are about 20 women right now with the Kibera Paper Projects. In order to provide for them and to, I don't even like to say like provide for them, or we are giving them the advance of their work, right? We had to become our own payroll protection plan because we don't qualify for them because we don't have employees. We have contractors. Those are our contractors. So Elava had created its own payroll protection plan in order to provide 2 to 3 month payroll for our women and to be able to buy some supplies for them to be able to feed their family as we go. So right now, they're good for the next 3 months as we continue to do our campaign through Elava Gives Back so people can donate, and because we just continue to put in a percentage of our sales towards their livelihood until we are back to normal. But things are hard because the Western measurement that we are taking to prevent the spread of the coronavirus, it does not work in that environment at all.
Well, I'm glad to hear that for the time being, things are pretty good and you've got a plan going forward. Thanks very much. It was great hearing about Elava, and thank you very much, Rahel Mutula Williams. And
yay, you did it. You did it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jerome.
Nice meeting you.
Likewise.
We're going to swing over now, and and stay virtually in Kenya. And Jaylan Adley from Refugee is here, and Refugee is an organization that works with young women in Nairobi, Kenya, who are refugees. And it's great to talk with you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yep.
Perfect.
So tell people about Refugee, people who haven't heard of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been around for 12 years, and we serve unaccompanied, separated, and orphaned refugee girls that are minors. So about 12 years ago, our co-founders were actually working in refugee affairs in East Africa and saw that there was a major gap when it came to services for refugee girls. And whoever's doing the slide, just feel free to kind of move them along as I'm talking. It'll flow easier. You'll kind of get my cues and you can go from there. So they saw that there was a major gap when it came to young unaccompanied women. So these are girls that either were separated from their parents as they were fleeing. Most of the countries that they're coming from are Congo, South Sudan, Somalia. Back in the day, it was Ethiopia, Eritrea, etc. Or their parents were killed or assassinated in conflict, and they had to kind of flee on their own. So because they're unaccompanied and they're girls, they're highly vulnerable, which means that most of them have suffered sexual violence. Their education was interrupted. A lot of them come pregnant or with children from that sexual violence. So we're really dealing with the highly, highly vulnerable cases of refugees. And you can kind of see from the statistics here, it's tough cases that come in. So Refugee was really set up, and we can advance to the next slide, as being a kind of direct service, holistic approach. So we are kind of brick and mortar, right? We essentially become the community and parents for refugee girls. So in Kenya, refugees, it's fairly challenging in Kenya. There's a lot of xenophobia. They don't have a lot of rights. You know, they don't have a right to work. And technically, most refugees are supposed to go in the camp system, but there's not a lot of opportunities in the camp system, or perceived opportunities. So a lot of times young girls skip the camps and go to urban centers like Nairobi in hopes that they'll find a job. And that usually means, you know, working in someone's home as domestic labor, where they're typically then exploited again by family members. So for us, we do everything. It's kind of, you know, first immediate protection, then education, then empowerment. So from our safe house, where we take the most vulnerable cases, we have about 70 beds, taking care of like immediate needs, right? Healthcare, psychosocial support. And then we have an accelerated education program, which is basically a condensed version of Kenya's primary school education, and also English and Kiswahili, because most are coming speaking neither of those languages. And then we do vocational training. Right now we do tailoring, so they can learn a skill that they can take out into the informal sector, because that's kind of the only option that they have, and then wraparound services from there. And we can go to the next slide. So the Artisan Collective is our social enterprise, which is a way for us to be able to provide them with an income. So because they cannot get it's hard to get a work permit, and they cannot get an income as refugees, we are able to provide them with a stipend as long as it falls below a certain threshold. So we created the Artisan Collective so that they can continue to enhance their tailoring skills after they finish 2 years of tailoring school. Where they're able to make scarves like the ones that I'm wearing, pillowcases, towels, all these kinds of like home goods and things like that, which we then sell in the global marketplace online, as well as pop-up shops in Chicago and around the world, and then also locally in Nairobi. It's a 2-year apprenticeship program. And then if we keep moving forward, so you can kind of look at the impact, right? We are very much kind of deep in the work that we are doing. And back in the day, a lot of our girls, about 25%, were getting resettled to a third country through the United Nations kind of refugee body that works with different governments. Typically, those countries would be the US, Canada, or Europe. As the global rate has gone down, refugees are getting stuck in what we call a host country like Kenya, which is actually the first country they actually escape to across a border from the conflict zone, where then they register with the United Nations in a Kenya, get into the system, then their case is processed for a formal resettlement. Being stuck in a host country means that they are limited to what that country allows an asylum seeker or refugee to do. So if we advance to the next slide, as I said again, in Kenya, it really is the informal economy that is their only option. So if we can advance to the next slide. So what we're doing in face of a global pandemic. Our problem is that, you know, the girls come to the Artisan Collective and they work in the workshop where they're able to make these products, and then we're able to give them food and transportation and a stipend. Well, because we're an educational institution, we had to shut down when the government mandated it, when coronavirus got to Kenya on March 15th, I believe it was. And so we kind of had to go into an emergency response mode. Immediately it was, you know, cash transfers, making sure that they have money to be able to pay for their rent, food supplies, because we knew as refugees, their landlords would probably try to evict them or increase their rent. And then we, you know, after it kind of became clear that this was going to be a long haul shelter in place, a lot of the girls started to ask us, you know, is there something that we can do? Can we come back? You know, how can we help? And so, and if we advance to the next slide, we kind of went through a process of looking at one, could we do something safely where we could bring some of the girls back to campus? And two, did we have the right fabric to be able to make masks? So the fabric for our scarves, for example, was too porous, so it wouldn't work. But the fabric that we used for our pillowcases was actually the right cotton weave to be able to make masks. So we brought 6 of the girls back to campus, and we basically emptied out some of our staff members' offices and put 2 sewing machines kind of across each room so that they were distance apart. 2 staff members are sleeping on campus with the girls, each of them in separate rooms, and they're all wearing masks so that they can do social distancing. And it's a way for them to earn kind of extra income and also kind of feel productive, because they were, sitting at home in these communities. Most of the refugee communities are slums. So again, as our colleague in Tanzania said, right, social distancing doesn't really work. Access to clean water and hygiene doesn't work in these communities. So frankly, it's safer for them to be on campus than out there. So we are going to sell the masks in Nairobi to be able to kind of put money back into the program, but then we're also going to do a donation mask where then our girls will each get a mask, as well as the older refugee women that we work with in the community. I think the big lesson here, right, for our sector is, one, that there's an opportunity. What we're learning is that the supply chain has become so globalized, right, that we're having issues being able to actually supply things locally and be able to support local artisans, local, manufacturers, et cetera. So if you look at Kenya, for example, it's actually really hard to get locally made fabric. We have to get our fabric from China. It is practically impossible to get locally made fabric in Kenya. So the closest thing is Ethiopia that has cotton fabric, and even the kitenge is typically coming from West Africa. Most of the kitenge made in East Africa is coming from West Africa. And that's why you see, when you go to the marketplace, it's almost like the 10 same patterns that every kind of stall has. So there's not a lot of unique fabric, versus if you go to Ghana, you will find that, yes, the marketplaces have kind of the same colors that are then shipped over to East Africa, but you have also a lot more boutique shops that have kitenge that range different colors, right? Not your typical patterns, different modernized, different colors, and all of that stuff. So how can we use this opportunity to think about what parts of the supply chain need to be localized? And then how can we start supporting local artisans? And I think that's it's a consumer thing as well as a business thing. So if you look, so I'm Egyptian, my family in Egypt has seen a transition there, and they're running into this problem. So in Egypt, similar with Kenya, you can actually make high quality wood furniture for really cheap. Well, IKEA came to Egypt. Everybody got fascinated with IKEA, despite the fact that it's actually more expensive than making real wood furniture. So what happened? All of the local artisans lost their jobs to IKEA. And now with coronavirus, IKEA's global supply chain is not working as fast. Things aren't coming to Egypt as quickly. It's shut down. And now the local artisans, are not making money, and they're stuck in these slums, and it's kind of a cycle. So, I think Kenya is a little bit behind that. It actually has an opportunity to catch itself before it gets there, because you still find most of the population buying goods from local makers, as well as kind of the local marketplace. So I think there's an opportunity in East Africa to use this as a learning and see how can we kind of dial back that problem of, getting everything in from China because it's cheaper, or, shutting down kind of local things, and how can we support that process? And then I think the bigger thing is, if you look at, East Africa, they have dealt with far worse pandemics in terms of the mortality, right? We're seeing that coronavirus is highly contagious, but the rate of death is far lower than what we've seen in East Africa. And yet, because the West kind of wasn't able to actually handle something like this because we weren't used to it, they did early precautions and shut everything down in Kenya, which was the right thing to do. But you're also running into an economy that can't necessarily survive being shut down this much, because most of the people are working in the informal sector and day-to-day laborers. So there has to be a way to kind of balance, how do you, make sure that the healthcare needs are being done, but a localized approach to that, because we're going to see far more deaths from hunger, most likely, than we are from the coronavirus itself. And I talked a lot, so I'm gonna stop there.
That was great, Jan. Really interesting and fascinating how you've adjusted, and keep up the great work with Refugee. I know you're taking your your fabulous event that you do every year, your fashion event online this year, and keep up the great work.
Thank you. Yes, June 18th, tune in. We'll be doing our fashion challenge online, where you have an opportunity to vote on your favorite design as well as buy scarves from our online shop.
I was there one year and got my mother-in-law, it's her favorite scarf, the scarf she got from Jeffrey.
That's
She
wonderful.
wears this flashy tie-dye scarf, and it looks great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And we're gonna swing over now and talk about some Bangladeshi fair trade artisans who work with Motif, and Jackie Corlett, who I know from the Daily Plaza events that we were at together, and they do some beautiful things with reworking saris and have some outstanding accessories. And I'll be interested to hear how people are doing in Bangladesh. Hi, Jackie, how are you?
Hello there, how are you doing? It's great to see you again, Jerome.
Tell it for people who don't know about Motif, say a little about it and then how you're adjusting.
Yeah, in our first slide here, I basically just spoken to how I first came to be involved, because obviously Bangladesh is a long way away, but from where I was born. But I got there in '89, and I'm a textile designer by profession, and it was an amazing collaboration that began between the hand weavers with their exceptional skills and just being able to bring design awareness into that. We were able to really push forward in terms of just seeing the effect of good orders coming in. And I think it was probably within a year I was absolutely hooked. There was no way I was going back to the London design scene. It's just, I mean, you make the fat cats fatter, right? And here we were making sure kids were at school. We were making sure that people weren't going to moneylenders. It was just a completely other experience. So yeah, I was hooked, and that was '89. So I'm still involved today. The next slide, please, is fast forwarding about 9 years. And in '98, 3 Bangladeshi partners and I together, we decided to set up Motif, and with the intention, with my background being in woven textiles, to establish a range of beautiful, ethically produced yardage fabrics, which today sounds fine, right? But in '98, not so much. There just was not the market. The internet was at such a rudimentary level, believe it or not, that there was no way we could generate the information needed. So that failed. And like we're pivoting all over the place now, we pivoted and I began to design various bags and accessories and things like that, which we've been doing now for about 20 years. So that's been the way forward. And they're the kind of things that you'll see on our B2B site, which is just there at the bottom right-hand corner. But obviously through this last 20 years, we have weathered a lot of storms together. My team and I lived in Bangladesh for about 20 years, and it's obviously nobody has been through anything like this ever before. The relationships that we have built between each other, the camaraderie that we have, really does mean that the families, whether they're Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, whomever, we're there for each other. And it's continuing that way now. And I have to say that when we talk about relationships, we have to talk as well about, you know, all the people that we've seen at Daily Plaza over the years, and every other fair trade customer that there is part of this huge family, because we have the same ethical DNA. We're in it and we can't do anything else. So what we find now, the fruit of all of that that's gone on through the years has made the artisans that we're working with the stronger members of their families. They're the ones in a more resilient position that others are turning to. So that, I think, is really important to encourage people to see that, you know, it's not just a luxury item. It really is, it's been contributing a lot all the way through. Next slide, please. Both of my colleagues have spoken to the horrendous prospect that is unfolding in many nations now that are so densely populated. And that's definitely happening in Bangladesh. But at Motif, we're trying to pivot again by, as well as the B2B, which is not rolling right now, we're pivoting and doing a bit of retail, which if people go to our website, you get to see some of our fabrics now. We're now starting fabrics again. And that's what we're hoping is gonna begin to fuel the cash flow. We've already been sending advance payments and pre-orders that we know customers are going to be interested in, but they just need that push ahead. We're also going to be making the WFTO Asia masks, the People's Mask, that's a design that was put out by Hong Kong and can give up to 81% protection when it's properly used. There's about 10 countries involved in the production of this now, and Motif is going to be, we're going to be one of the partners of that as well going forward. But the other thing we've been doing is a lot of thinking. And this is where I see, we're all coming through this with a very different perspective on the world. People that have not really thought about how connected we are before, recognize it now. We are in this together. And it is an amazing testament, I think, that fair trade, handmade goods, we've always championed them for the benefits they are for the people that make them. But I really believe now we're in a time when these products are going to be benefiting us, because we're coming out of this with less money, we're going to be buying fewer things, and the things that we want to buy, we don't want them messing up people's lives with abuse. We don't want them trashing the planet. And fair trade handmade products are absolutely ripe for moving that forward. What I want to see at Motif, we've just started a group, you'll see it here, called Handmade Resolution. If anybody wants to start hooking into that, please do, because I'm concerned and we are looking to move the scale of production of handmade fair trade goods up, so that there's it's scaled up, it begins to produce much more to meet daily needs in ways that are affordable. So that's one of the big things that we're moving forward to now. I know I just chomped down on you, Jerome. I so love your questions, but there's so little time.
That was great. I was really glad you did that. And I'm glad to hear that you're making your adjustments, and that sounds really promising about making the masks and doing the bold fabrics too. It's great to see you, Jackie, and keep up the great work with Motif.
Thanks so much. Looking forward to the next time.
We'll swing over to Columbia here and talk with Laura McMahon. She's the owner of Susu Accessories, and she works with YU women in her birthplace of Guajira, Colombia. And it's great to hear you, Laura. Great to see you.
Hi, Jerome. How's it going? It's great to see you again.
Tell people, we're seeing some pictures of your bags, which are fantastic and incorporate part of the unique weaving that they do there in your area in Colombia. And Tell us a little bit more about your impetus for this and then what happened, what's happened during COVID-19.
Right. So, as you mentioned, I am from Colombia, and I grew up around the Wayuu indigenous tribe. The Wayuu tribe is known by the work of the artisanal work of their women, who are expert knitters, and their tradition goes back generations. Having known that, and after moving to the United States, I was able to leave my engineering job and work full time in a partnership with Susu Accessories, so we can basically bring this amazing work of art to the forefront of fashion, because it's always been high quality, beautiful work, but it was always undervalued, underpaid, and underrepresented. Not only that, but the Wayuu tribe is in La Guajira, Colombia, which is 80% desert, and despite holding the biggest coal mine in the continent, 66% of the population lives in poverty, and 35% of the whole population lives in extreme poverty over there. So you're talking about a handbag that takes 30 days to be made, handmade, that lasts for the rest of your life, and people not wanting to pay what it was worth. So that was something that struck dear to my heart. And with Susu, we are able to flip the script with that and produce fashion collections that are 100% made by the Wayuu. So all the handbags that we're looking at right now, they're 100% made by them. They're designed by us in collaboration with the Wayuu. But these are women that are sustaining very large households. Most of them don't have electricity or running water, and they work on their own timeline. So they can come to the workshop, get training, get materials, and then just go about their days in their daily lives, and to be able to produce something that is not going to necessarily interfere with their day-to-day and what they really need in taking care of their families. So we've been in business for about 5 years. Well, actually, no, going on 6 years, and we are very proud of the work that we've done, because since starting Susu, we went from buying traditional Wayuu bags from about 20 artisans, not working together, and now working with over 250 women, most of them heads of households, that we can provide training, and we can give them a steady source of income. So that's very, it's proudful work, but it's always been challenging, just not only because of their situation, the lack of government help in Colombia and where they live, but the location makes it even more difficult because they are so remote. So just to give you a perspective, from the closest city where you can hire a car to take you to our workshop in La Guajira, depending on the weather, it can be between 16 to 25 hours of non-existing road through the desert. And these are, the conditions in which they live. So that's kind of like the background of Susu. But then now with COVID, there's just another set of, challenges that are coming our way.
I mean, sometimes I think people would think it's so remote that you maybe have less issues with COVID.
Right. And so that is true partially because social distancing is easier between families, but also a lot of families, you have 20, 25 people living within the same house. So then you don't have social distancing within the same family. The biggest issue over there is that water supply is 50% less than the rest of the country on the regular conditions. So expecting people to wash their hands is not really feasible. 40% of the population in the state of La Guajira doesn't have electricity. So working remotely is a complete utopia. So the water supply only arrives once a week, and it's a very, very poor quality. So, quarantine is done only halfway because of the lack of resources and the hunger. The biggest problem in La Guajira and with the Wayuu community is hunger, is malnutrition. So it's one of the, latest, I know there's malnutrition all over the world, but it's unheard of that in a country like Colombia, there's so many children still dying from malnourishment. So if you combine that with a situation, like COVID, in which, people can take care of themselves, that just makes it that much bigger. So yes, they are remote. So in a sense, luckily there hasn't been that many cases, but the biggest issue right now is the lack of resources with water, the lack of transportation, because they're so remote, food doesn't get there as easily on the regular basis. So now it's that much more difficult. For instance, for our products, we only get usually one car goes in a week and one car comes out in a week. So then, we have to make sure that we can follow that cycle. Right now, it's been about 3 weeks since a car has been able to get out. And the only reason why we're still getting transportation is because we as a company have hired them privately. And so that's been very difficult in that sense, which is kind of different. Children under 5-year-old are the most vulnerable to the virus because of the malnourishment, or the malnutrition in the state, and that just is not about to change anytime soon. So in the YU situation is even more critical because, for instance, during the first 2 weeks of this month, indigenous of the tribe just blocked the main highway. It's called Troncal del Caribe, and that links Riohacha with Maicao, the two main cities in La Guajira, and asking for food and water supplies. So what happened was, because they were also blocking humanitarian help, which, we was for all one truck helping them. 43 indigenous people were arrested because of the blockage. So then you have that unrest amongst people because there's no food and water. And there's also the part that La Guajira is in the border with Venezuela. And so there's a lot of illegal immigration. And the illegal immigration from Venezuela is not that Colombia doesn't want. As a matter of fact, Colombia is the country that has accepted most Venezuelan refugees in the whole world. The fact of the matter is that when the borders are closed right now, there's a lot of illegal access points in which they come through, and these are people that are not being tested. So then the issue becomes not that they're coming, but if they're coming infected, there's no way to track them. So that's been, another part of the issue that it's just been, made it that much greater. As we all know, in Venezuela, the situation has been quite terrible and deteriorating over the past 10 years. And now with the virus, those poor people just have no way to go. For an indigenous tribe like the YU, it's just unattainable. So right now, as a small company, a small business that we are, we've always had that 10% of our sales goes to just social projects with the YU, and those have helped us work with the leaders and help them with anything from putting their kids through college, to help them improve their living conditions, to help build a workshop in which they can, train, work together, communicate, commiserate, and just. But right now, the focus is basically providing them with food and water, and just the very, very basic needs. And so to that effect, luckily, the YU meeting is popular around the world. And with Susu, we've done a decent job, within our resources to promote that everywhere in the world. So even though in some countries our sales have gone down, in some other countries they continue. So we've been able to sustain ourselves with that, because the biggest thing right now is that these women, you're right, they don't have corona, but they need to be able to work. So keeping them working is our biggest challenge right now. And so that's how we're trying to help them, as well as just provide them with means of transportation to get in and out, water and food supplies. Jerome, you're muted.
I've always been so impressed with what you do and the way you've been able to help these women and people in your home community. And I hope things pan out here and things get better.
Yeah, we can. We all have a lot of hope. It's like we've all been saying, the world is changing, and if nothing else, this pandemic has shown us that we are connected together, that we need to work together, that just because maybe you get this virus doesn't mean that it's good for you to get it just because you can affect someone else. And it's made us that much closer with each other. It's helped us. I've since last year, I've created this marketplace called The Guild, in which we host about 30 different sustainable and fair trade businesses. And we opened a store in Chicago, but then we just opened in Lakeview in January, and we had to close in February because, of the pandemic. And so now it's created another opportunity for us to, okay, well then let's create an online marketplace in which everything is sustainable, fair trade, supporting small businesses and handmade from all over the world, including lots of local artists. So before we didn't have time to do that, but now we do. we're forced to. So now it's an exciting opportunity for us to be able to promote all these incredible brands like Susu that are really struggling right now. So we just kind of have to stay positive, just change the narrative and say, hey, this is an opportunity. I mean, Mother's Day is still going to happen. So people are still going to buy gifts for their mothers. So here we are, buy something that not only is going to be beautiful, well made, but also is going to help an amazing community, not only one, but from many, many countries around the world. So that's what we're focusing on right now, and keeping close tabs with our leaders who they've never had it easy before. They know what struggle looks like. They throughout generations. I mean, the running joke where I come from is that, politicians only remembered that the way you were there in times of election. And so they would just pave the road just enough so the car can get close enough so they can get the votes, and then, and they go away. And it's sad, but it's true. And so it's up to us to do something about that and just change the narrative and just, and like everybody else said, I mean, these workers, these people are very, very talented. And what they do is quality, and what they do can compete in many, runway around the world. And what they do is something that's going to last you forever. So that is something that we, as a mission, have it in our minds, and we have to continue working towards that.
Well, congratulations, and keep up the great work there, Laura McMahon and Susu Accessories. We'll keep looking for your beautiful bags all over the place.
Thank you so much, Ron.
We're going to swing back and have a final chat with Catherine Bissell-Cordova, Executive Director of Chicago Fair Trade, and say a few things about how everybody else in the Chicago Fair Trade movement is doing. How are you there, Catherine?
I'm really, tonight I'm like very proud and quite choked up and in awe of all the people that we've heard speak tonight and last night. Honestly, and for those of you who were there last night, when you heard about, we had Elizabeth Cline on talking about people working in Bangladesh, garment workers, and facing starvation versus Pushpika, and looking at all of the fair trade artisan partners who are struggling, no doubt, but it's just so amazing to me the difference in the lives of the people that are involved in fair trade and the people that aren't. So yeah, we're we have 60 business members. They're all fantastic, amazing. As you've just heard, everyone tonight who just spoke in this session are all Chicago Fair Trade business members. We have 60 members. They're incredibly tenacious. Many are doing fundraisers to provide food and water at the very least to their artisan groups. And they're also here, applying for PPP loans and all these things. And we're all, a lot of people are talking B2B, B2C, business to business is what that means for those of you that don't know. So a lot of our business members actually sell to retailers and don't have their own storefronts, but these stores are closed. So a lot of them now are selling directly to customers, as you've heard some people talking about. So that's our business members.
And so Chicago Fair Trade, it's doing okay. How do you adjust? I mean, obviously you're missing the biggest kind of public face you get to put in the organization for the year. How's it going?
It's going okay. Next slide, please. One thing that we always feel that have been pretty good at is creating community. Next slide, please. Thanks. I'm like, I look great. And I love those pictures are fun. That was Isabel, our intern, who's amazing, who's made a lot of the graphics that are fabulous. But so one thing we started right away, we said, let's Saturday mornings, let's just have a fair trade coffee clash. We're not having one this Saturday just because of this whole week has been quite a lot of work, which has been wonderful. But so every Saturday, except for today, until the shelter in place is over, you can join us on Saturdays. And, we've talked about fair trade, and we just talk about anything really, but just keeping our community connected. And that's been going really well next. So much so that we also decided to do a Chicago Fair Trade tea time. That's on Thursdays. It's just for 10 or 15 minutes. one thing we have been able to do too, we're upping our social media game as everyone is, right? And our Zoom game and all of that now. Our YouTube channel, which Sarah, our volunteer coordinator, talked about, she asked you to go on and like that. Some of these folks that you just heard from today, it's people like that a lot of times that we're just interviewing. A week from today, we're going to actually have a tour of one of our volunteer, Jennifer Ratcliffe's amazing closet. She's like the best dresser and has all ethical closet. And Holly Greenhagen, a volunteer, is going to do a tour. It's going to interview her and do a tour of her closet. So next slide, please. So we've been trying to keep people connected. We also have been sharing more of what our business members do, which is something we're able to do here. So we asked all of our business members, please send us a profile of what your businesses are, what your artisans are going through right now. So we've been featuring them. So if you follow us on social media or get our e-newsletter, we've been sharing these profiles. We also need to make sure that we have money to survive. So we just did a Mother's Day silent auction in which, you know, our community is so amazing. All of our business members were, yes, I'll donate something to you. And, you know, people were going out and bidding over the fair market value of prices. So, so we have that go on. Next, I am very happy to say we got the PPP grant last week. Take that, Ruth Chris, right? So that was good. You might have seen we've been pushing hard. We're selling, you know, coffee, and that's actually a product that's sales are really up for coffee. And we have our wonderful business member Metropolis, who we partner with. They roast it, and then we have, you know, a fair trade business, Marish, who was nice enough to donate some chocolates to us. So if you order coffee, we send you free chocolates. On the next slide, you can see, we're going to pull up here our website, going back a little bit. So what I talked about, we now have, it's loading. So here we created a COVID-19 section on our website. We're getting better about keeping our website up to date. And if you look at that and click on that, we have where you can get masks. There was a great presentation about masks last night. I'm very happy with I have my Cambodian, Malia Designs and Fairnita are selling these masks from Cambodia. That's going to be the big new item moving forward, fair trade masks, that's for sure. Next, we've also been moving our different events to virtual, such as this event, which it's obviously very different, yet it's still, I'm quite happy, you know. We did a Fashion Revolution event, which we've done the last few years with DePaul, and that's when we turned to, we did it online. We had, I think, about 100 people there. It went really well. Our friend Elizabeth Cline called in. We did a fair trade fashion show online. Our wonderful MC, Andrea Dennis, emceed it, and it was really great. So, yeah, we're getting things done. Next slide, please. What we have coming up in June too is an individual membership drive, our second annual. These are some of our memes from last year's that my kids were thought were so cringy. My memes, they're like, that is such a 2010 font, Mom. But anyhow, here we are. So you'll be hearing from us in June. We're asking people to join as individual members or renew. Yeah, so it's kind of crazy how busy we all can all of a sudden be working from our couch. But we're keeping it alive. We just really want to keep fair trade in people's forefront in their mind.
We heard a lot of talk about resiliency tonight in the supply chain conversation and in our conversation with some of the business members. How do you feel about resiliency and fair trade right now?
Well, I saw a very interesting, there's an interesting report that came out, the World Fair Trade Organization commissioned. It came out in January, and it said that fair trade businesses are 4 times less likely to go bankrupt than non-fair trade businesses. Now, I mean, fair trade business is also a very hard way to do it. It's never easy to be a fair trader. I mean, because doing the right thing is not always the easiest thing, but so they'll pay, you know, I mean, a tenet of fair trade is, you know, paying upfront, which, you know, look at how these major garment brands are doing. They have all the product made and they're not paying them. And that happens a lot with, you know, all the time in fast fashion. But in spite of that, as you see, they're so committed, and they're so committed to their fair trade artisan partners, producers, and farmers. And I think people, I know, as we said, we all are thinking about what we're buying, and if you go to the next slide, one thing that's been so striking to me is what you've been seeing, these kinds of memes, these kinds of posts. I was driving around in the North Shore looking at wildlife recently, and in these mansions, they had signs up on their front yard saying, "Thank you, postal workers, thank you, grocery store workers," which to me was really quite shocking, because that's something a lot of us on this call and on this, joining in, we think about that. But, suddenly it's becoming very clear that, a grocery store workers, we wouldn't eat if it weren't for them, so I'm hopeful that people will be much more conscious consumers, and will be much more thoughtful about supply chains, and be much more thoughtful about the workers. And, as we had Shali come in here before too, I think there's a lot of people that didn't realize until this pandemic that like labor law in the United States, people don't automatically get sick leave. No, none, so I'm hopeful that a lot of, that some good, it's not, that we can't go back to business as usual, and really hope that, we're at a very important juncture right now. And we just really have to grow the fair trade movement more and more, and make it, become the norm.
Well, congratulations on doing this and pulling off such a fancy Zoom thing.
It's fancy. It's very fancy. And I love your background, Jerome. It's so apropos for you. And I think if we had the polling, I don't really know how to poll on here, but if we did know how to poll, I think we'd do like beard or no beard. And I think the beard would win.
Oh, the beard's fun.
The beard's great. Anyhow.
I don't like the maintenance, but other than that.
Yeah. Well, anyhow, yeah, we shall see. We shall see what's going to come of all of this. But thank you so much for joining us again, Jerome.
I'm looking forward to happy hour tomorrow night.
Yeah, me too.
Do that.
Me too. Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Jerome. Andrea, are you here? Can you join us?
But of course. Thank you again, Jerome. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you to our fair trade business members who shared their stories. Catherine and I texted, we're just like, we're so proud, I'm in awe. And it really is such an honor to be able to have a platform to share your stories and support your work. So thank you to all of the presenters for being here today. And one thing that Catherine didn't mention about our resiliency is just our commitment to community and expanding community. And we actually haven't announced it publicly yet, but we've welcomed some new board members, and we're expanding our board of directors and creating more volunteer opportunities. And that's another way we're really committing to a long-lasting Chicago Fair Trade presence here in Chicago. So we've got 2 minutes to wrap it up, and we are very committed to being prompt and on time. Again, thank you to everybody who joined as a panelist, and also to our people who are out there in virtual Landia. Thank you for staying with us, staying the course. Please join us tomorrow for our Fair Trade Happiness Hour from 6 to 7 p.m. We'll raise a glass to fair trade and some special sneak peeks. We'll be joined by Evan the Chef, a Master Chef Junior finalist, organic gardener, philanthropist, and Fair Trade Change Maker. We'll also be joined by Whitney Young high school students sharing how they became Chicago's first designated fair trade school. And a teaser, you'll have to join in to learn more about the next slide, this Chaco truck. And so to close it out, one more thanks to our sponsors, Oxfam and Marketplace Handwork of India. Good night, sweet dreams, and we'll see you tomorrow.